Amanda Dames, known professionally as the Kink Consultant, is a Las Vegas-based certified somatic sex and relationship coach and American Board of Sexology certified sexologist. She helps individuals and couples explore kink, enhance communication around desires, and builds holistic, pleasure-rich relationships. With over a decade of personal journey, from Ireland to New York City to Vegas, Amanda uses her own transformative story to guide others in embracing their sexuality without shame. She specializes in creating safe, judgment-free spaces to navigate boundaries, the roles of dominant and submissive, and erotic connection through embodied coaching and experiential techniques. I'm very curious now what the experiential techniques are, but I'll ask that later. You're very, very welcome. Thank you so much. I am sorry that I've caused you to spill your coffee, and
It's okay.
hoping that won't spoil the whole day. The first thing I have to ask, really, I guess, is what were your formative years like? Were you a very sensual, sexual person in your teens? Would the person you were when you were 13, 14 recognize who you are today?
I'm proud to say the person who I was on at 13 or 14 would think I was a fucking badass today, but not recognize this person. I'd say when you are 13 or 14, you don't imagine you're going to go on the internet and talk about your sex life and how you help others with theirs. My formative years so I was born in the States, but I grew up in Ireland. I moved there when I was 11.
Mm-hmm.
And from the age of 5, I always say I was born kinky, right? And this plays a large part in who I am now and the work I do because I felt like a complete weirdo. I felt like such a weirdo. I had my own mother on the podcast to say, like, did you know I was kinky as a child? Like, I asked her point blank and she had no idea, but I felt like I was wearing this scarlet letter and everyone was like, knew she's into something weird because I was obsessed with
Just
spanking.
interrupt there for a second.
Yeah.
To be fair, your mum didn't know what a dominant and submissive was on the
No,
podcast.
she
So
did.
I'm not sure she was that aware of this sort of stuff.
No, but I think that that's actually a really good point. But most parents that I talk to do not know their children's kinks or if their children are kinky, even the ones who are aware of it. She's more aware than you think on stuff, sexually related stuff. She has like a sixth sense about things, which is why I thought she would have been like, oh, I thought you were different. Do you know what I mean? She's got,
Yeah.
but she didn't. Anyway, that really affected me because I didn't understand what I was interested in. And actually I was not sensual as even a teen because I was struggling with understanding how to pair my desire for this kink and my need for it with what sex was. So I didn't feel sexual at all because I was so confused by this obsession that I had with spanking and punishment and BDSM. It made it hard to make the connection. It wasn't until my later teens that I really started to lean in and understand myself better. That was a great question. No one has ever asked me that before.
Oh, yeah, you want to know what somebody's come from, don't you?
Yeah.
So did you, although you were confused about these different elements, and it wasn't until a bit later on that you explored them, were you at least in touch with your own body? Did you explore your own body? Did you know what brought you pleasure?
Oh, great question. Did I explore my own body? Yes. I was in touch with my body. I tried to pay attention to a lot of things about
Mhm.
myself because I was constantly trying to figure myself out. I knew enough to know I was confused and I needed to figure it out. It wasn't until I was 13 that I started to even understand what was going on with my body. And that would be, I'd say that was honestly, when I was 13 is when I first touched myself and masturbated. And it was when I saw a TV show about this couple who went to see a dominatrix. It's actually an English TV show, like one of those reality shows on Bravo. Do you remember that channel?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Bravo in the United States is very different from Bravo in the UK.
Okay.
Bravo's like reality TV that is not like that. But anyway, I was watching it and I saw this couple and they went to a dominatrix because they were both submissive. And everything fell into place for me at that moment. I realized, oh, what I think about all the time is actually something related to my sex life. That's when the awareness began. And I realized, I thought at that time, I was like, oh, okay, in a few years, I'll go to England and I'll find a dominatrix to spank me and then everything will be okay. So like that was, and 1 year later, I had my first boyfriend spank me. So like the progression was fast after I started to realize what was going on.
It's when I've talked to girlfriends or friends that have a submissive nature, one of the things that they say they found quite hard is to get their partners to spank them, tie them up, and more. I mean, spanking is this is the sort of gentle end of where things could go, and it's like, oh my god, it's just I ask him to spank me, and it's like he's just patting me or something. But I don't want to come across as weird. Do you find that sometimes partners just aren't comfortable being the dominant person?
I think we all find discomfort in what we don't know well, right?
Yeah,
And it's an interesting thing because there's a goal. It's not just spank someone, it's spank someone to the point that they're turned on.
yeah,
So I think if you were just spanking a friend and they're like, hey, can you spank me? It has a lot less, there's a lot less tied to it, you know?
yeah, yeah,
But when it's your partner and the aim is foreplay, you get in your head a lot, right?
yeah.
So I just had a client here yesterday and I was teaching him to spank for the first time because he said, oh, I don't know. I don't know how to. He's like, people ask me to spank, but like, I don't really get it. And I teach a lot of people. Like, that's probably one of the first things I teach people who want to become more dominant, move into the BDSM space. And it's not because of my love of spanking, it's just the
Mm,
perfect gateway impact
mhm,
play to create
yeah.
connection.
Mm. And it's funny, isn't it? Because, like you say, it's not necessarily just the physical spanking. I love spanking. There's so much that your partner gets out of the anticipation, or you're counted to a certain number, and then you don't spank them, and you spank them very quickly, or you spank them differently, and that's the whole thing. It's the whole scene, isn't it? It's the whole ambience that you set. Really, it's not just right spank me 20 times, because
No,
that's not going to do it. Really, it's just where is the spanking taking you in your mind. I think is much more important than the actual physical element itself.
it is. And it is really important because you're creating an energetic connection between you where there is that
Yeah.
power exchange. And it is very physical beyond just the spanking itself. When I teach it, I teach about bringing your bodies close together to create that
Mm,
connection, using the push pull, being very close to them and touching while spanking, and then pulling away a bit so that you create that desire in the person being spanked or receiving any type of impact to have that
mm,
closeness back, you know? And you play with the push pull of it to create some of that, like it's the arc of a scene, you know?
mm,
You're taking them on a journey and you're creating that when you're the person being dominant. And that is also why it is difficult to be the more dominant partner because you're planning the scene and taking them on a journey. And yes, someone has
yeah.
to submit, but the dominance takes a lot of effort too.
Mm. I was thinking of it in terms of if you think of a good classical music piece where it has peaks and troughs and
Yes.
crescendos and it builds and it dips and it builds and it dips. It doesn't do this.
No.
It doesn't do this. It has that. Oh, we're not quite there. I'll come around again. Oh, we're not quite there. Come around again. Oh, we are there and come around again. It's that. It is that. Yeah, it's almost musicality to it. It's how you get the rhythm and the patterns and all those things. And I think, yeah, exactly as you say, it is a scene you're creating, almost like you're creating a play in a way. You're creating this narrative through physical touch and voice sometimes and sound and everything else. And it's really interesting how important it is. I think that people do get exposed to how to get the most from it. Otherwise, it could be a very disappointing experience if somebody just hits you on the bottom 20 times.
I
It's like,
know. Yeah.
this was what I expected.
It's really it is really true. Like, and I do online sessions too where I teach people these things because like sometimes people can't come. Not everybody lives in Las Vegas, so
Yeah.
I teach people some of that push pull. And even though I can't physically do it, you know, it's easy to help someone build a scene when you explain the elements of it and break it down, and you understand what they want.
Mm. So even though you realized relatively young that you were kinky, you were interested in things that perhaps weren't the same as everybody else, how did you get from that to becoming the kink consultant? So I'm guessing you still, when you were sort of 7, 8, 9, 13, you didn't think, yeah, that's what I'm going to be. I'm going to be a consultant for people about their kinks. How did you move from starting to explore it to where you are now?
Oh, the answer is by making a lot of mistakes myself. So I had a lot of shame. Even though I discovered and understood what it was almost like the shame got worse once I realized, oh, this is sexual, because it was like it highlighted the fact that not only was I into this weird thing, but that was part of my sexuality. And I
Mm.
couldn't just be quote unquote normal, you know? So
Mhm.
I hid it. I didn't talk about it. I would get my boyfriends to spank me. And I didn't hide it that well from my boyfriends, but um, when I was 20, I eloped with a man I'd been dating for a year. And, it's easy early on to be spanked, but the more I got into BDSM and the more I learned, the more pressure I was putting on him to get into
Mhm.
it as well. And it wasn't
Yeah.
his thing. So we ultimately ended up divorcing, which once again, it just added more emphasis on the fact that I couldn't make a relationship work because of this weird thing about me. And after that, I moved to New York City and I took a job as a dominatrix myself in a New York City dungeon. And I would say that is what started the de-shamifying for me. I started to just, it was almost like exposure therapy. I had a lot of clients who were in their 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and I would talk to them about why they didn't have it in their marriage, why they were seeking it outside of the marriage. It was almost like a counseling session, like a
Mm.
coaching session.
Mhm.
And they opened up to me and they explained all of the reasons that they hid this part of themselves and why they didn't feel comfortable bringing it up, the mistakes they made in not being themselves earlier. And when I saw how my shame would look in 30 years if I was still not living the life I wanted to, it started to change my perspective because, you start balancing what's worse, hiding who I am and ending up 30 years into a marriage that I'm unhappy in, like so many of my clients would express,
Yeah, yeah.
or really just accepting and embracing this part of myself and trying to find someone who is into it as well. So that exposure therapy helped me. It helped my clients because it gave them an opportunity to talk it out about some of how they felt about the choices they'd made. And I'm not sure if they were doing that in therapy or anywhere else.
Yeah.
And so I spent 2 years as a dominatrix. I was moonlighting as a dominatrix, though. This was just a way to make some extra cash while living in probably one of the most expensive cities in the world, right? So my career started to take off, though. My day job at the Wall Street Journal, where I trained their customer service globally. So they were sending me to Hong Kong, the Philippines, just literally around the world. And I couldn't keep making my dungeon shifts. So I quit the dungeon and focused on my career. And I had a very fulfilling career. I was doing well. I think when I left my career, I was the director of retention strategy at NBC's streaming service. Like, I did well in my career, but I
Mm.
always missed this type of work. So I knew I needed to find a way back to it. And I found sex and relationship coaching. So I was like, okay, I'll be a sex and relationship coach. And the more I did that, and as I got certified, I realized I have a deep understanding of kink and BDSM that a lot of my fellow coaches don't understand in the same way because they didn't have a fetish. They didn't grow up with the shame
Yeah.
around it, you know? And I thought, what better way to use these talents than to help other people get over the shame faster than I did? So I learned from all of the things I'd done. And now I use that to help individuals and couples sort of speed up their own journey of
Mhm.
de-shamifying and really accepting and embracing their own kinky selves.
Did you find that when you were being a dominatrix, did it turn you on? Did you get something from it, or was it a very
Oh, sometimes. Yeah,
okay?
for sure. What it taught me was energy is so important.
Yeah.
Sometimes I would walk into a room to meet a client and they would meet all the girls working that night, or they would say, I want to see all the brunettes. And I would walk in and I'm telling you that you could just feel an energetic connection and you tap into it a little bit more because you start to
Yeah.
understand, okay, this is how this is going to work or it's not.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's the chemistry you talk about. You go on a date, there's spark. That
Yeah.
happened in session two. I was also a professional submissive. So not only would I dom, I would sub depending on what the client wanted.
Mhm.
Those ones were amazing. That part was probably the best job I ever had because I was just living out my fantasies. And doms and subs do not have sex, especially if you're working in a dungeon. It's a profession.
Yeah.
It's not escorting. So we I would get turned on, and there were things that I did that I never knew I'd enjoy. And I was exposed to them, and I'm grateful for that job. It really set me up for success for what I do now, I would say, because it's rare a client comes to me to talk about a kink or something they want to try that I haven't tried either on the topping end or the bottoming end of it. Yeah. Does that answer that question?
It does.
Yeah.
It does. Do you? you ever feel that we do people's choices and desires a disservice by referring to them as a kink or not normal or kinky? I mean, because kinky sounds amazing. It sounds like a menu of things you want to dive into. But I don't know whether the whole thing about calling it a kink, whether that makes people have a, oh gosh, I've got this kink that nobody else has, and the odds are there's 8 billion people on the planet. Somebody else has that kink. Now, if you're kinky and you're obsessed with lamps or with plugs or whatever, you are, and I mean electric plugs. You've got somebody else has that kink as well. So do you think that not sort of bunching everything together as normal makes it harder? Does that make sense?
It's an interesting question. I think about this a lot. It makes complete sense because I am under the impression that kink has a PR problem and
Yeah.
the word is actually scaring people off. I could
Mm.
talk for days about that. Um, but my thinking is with any label, right? No one, I talk to people about different labels all the time, whether they're a dom or sub, what their
Mhm.
sexuality is, how they identify. I find that labels are important to help us filter down to what we should research to understand ourselves better. But you're right.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of labels either. I don't view what I like as kinky, but one of the reasons the word kink is important to me is it's important to differentiate it from what I have, which is a fetish. And there is a difference between a kink and a fetish. So I find that these words, although we might rail against them because they feel confining and othering at this, at the same
Mhm.
time, they're very helpful in helping us drill down into who we are and helping.
Mm.
They're signposts for go
Mhm.
down this path and learn more about yourself, but they don't define us. So it's not when you walk down a street, you don't see a sign and put it in your pocket and keep going and hold it like this is me. I think it's a
Yeah.
directional thing. And we treat it more like I said, a label that we carry as opposed to a directional thing that we should just be like identifying and being like, oh, let me go down this path.
And how would you differentiate a kink and a fetish?
Great question. So, a kink is a nice to have. It's something that you enjoy and it's fun to add in, and you might need it or want it for a fully fulfilling sex life. A fetish is something that you literally cannot orgasm without thinking about it. So, I
Mhm.
have never had an orgasm where I haven't at least turned myself on or had a passing thought about being punished or disciplined or punishing and disciplining somebody else.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's a fetish. And there are plenty of fetishes. Balloon fetish, foot fetish is so popular now, it's mainstream almost. But for
Yeah.
the true fetishist, they cannot orgasm or have, I always say, have your cup filled, right? Because intimacy and feeling full pleasure can look different for different people. Orgasm is just a widely understood thing, but for people who experience it, it's about, I describe it as having my cup filled or my battery recharged. You get that from the fetish. So that's the difference. A kink is a nice to have, a fetish is a need to have. And not
Mm.
everybody has a fetish, and those words aren't interchangeable.
And like you were saying, then you can have a fetish and you can explore that fetish by yourself with your imaginations. Like I
Yeah.
say, you can masturbate and imagine being tied up and dominated or whatever, and that's still part of exploring the fetish. But yeah, as you explained, then it's something that you have to have as part of that
Yeah.
um, orgasm or part of reaching fulfillment. One of the phrases used in your website I really like is, and I haven't seen it described this way before, is ready to break the awkward silence. And I think that's behind so many issues that people have in, and I was going to say long-term relationships. I think just relationships, because it could be a month, it could be 20 years. And I think there is that fear of talking, even to the person that we are supposedly closest to, our wife, our husband, our long-term partner, um, we I think we maybe fear being either being laughed at, being judged, or being suddenly becoming something different in that person's eyes. So it's a super hard question. But when couples come to you, and I guess normally it's probably one person is driving something more than the other, how do you get them to have that? Or how do you get to create a safe space for that conversation?
Okay, so remember at the beginning of this podcast where I talked about experimental techniques of,
Yeah.
yeah, this is what I consider experimental. So
Mhm.
oftentimes, I'm not a therapist, I'm a coach. I find therapists bring couples together and teach them how to communicate. And then they're like, okay, now that you can communicate well, let's introduce these other things you want. I approach it differently. It is a known psychological fact that people are more afraid of losing what they have than working to gain something new. So what I
Yes.
do with each of the couple is I will take a couple and I will not separate them. I'll see them individually and I'll speak to the husband or the, let's just say, the man. And I'll say,
Mhm.
what is it you're interested in? What are you trying to achieve here? I'll speak to the woman. I said, how do you get your pleasure? What turns you on, right? How would you like to be intimate with your partner? And then I identify as, I almost curate a scene for them. And I say, okay, this is how you're going to work together. So I work with each of them individually and I tell them how to turn the other person on. I break the awkward silence by mediating between them. And then I bring them to, I'm not there, right? But I tell them, like, hey, this is something that I, as the kink consultant, let me explain to you how this person's mind works, what they might enjoy. I give, and then they have these amazing experiences together where both of their needs are being met and they're exploring together. Then I bring the couple together for coaching sessions to like where I'm talking to both of them in the same room. And the
Mhm.
idea is I've shown them how good it can be. Then I start to give them the tools to build it themselves. And that's different from, I think, what a lot of other coaches are doing because many coaches get deep into the feelings together, the communication, and focus on that first, which I think works for a lot of people. But in
Mm.
kink, there's often a lot of shame. There's
Yes.
there's a lot of embarrassment. And I try and break down the barrier for them individually before bringing them together to talk about it with each other. Because the vulnerability of telling your partner this, the same person who, I mean, let's be real. You're asking them to take out the trash. You're one of the two of you is cleaning the bathroom, right? On a regular basis. There are a lot of things that just are so normal and mundane that when you bring intimacy and vulnerability into it, it's harder because of the lives you live together. And I think that might be specific to kink. So that is why I do it this way. And that's why I call it experimental because from all the other coaches I'm talking to, nobody else is doing it this way. And
Mm.
it works. I've only been doing this for 2 years, admittedly, right? This type of coaching. I don't know if the long-term effects of 10 years from now, if that might or might not be the right way to go. And I think about that. That weighs on me sometimes. I'm like, I don't know long term, but from what I understand from the 2 years of proof, it is going well for couples because I give them a taste of something they've never tasted before. And I'm like, oh, here's how you make it.
And I guess for a lot of couples and individuals, you might have a fantasy about doing something. You might think you have a. If we leave the sort of fetish to one side, 'cause that's something quite different. But the sort of the kink side of things, and you might try something and actually not like it,
Yeah.
or you might try something and think, well, this is too mild, or you might try something and think, yeah, this is not what I saw in the films. It's almost that, because when you're not saying to your partner, right, this is what I want our sex life to be like now. It's not, because you just want to, well, maybe want to explore things in this area, and that's a challenge, I guess, because people know what they know, so they might have watched porn, they might have read a book, they might have, who knows, and real life generally isn't like porn. I've never had a female plumber come into the door and dropping all the clothes. I
You
live in
haven't?
I know I live in Ho. Maybe it should be New York or Vegas. Probably, it happens every day. But no, it's yeah. So actually, that does spark another question. So what do you think about porn in general, in terms of its positive or negative impact on kink and a kinky lifestyle?
Great question. If for me, porn is not a bad thing. I know a lot of people demonize it. I think that if you're addicted to porn, you need to
Yeah.
stop using it. But that's addiction.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, some people can really ingest porn at very healthy rates for them and they
Mhm.
don't need it. Okay. I love to talk to my clients about porn. It helps give me insight into what turns them on. So I'll often have clients send me the porn they watch so that I can get a better understanding of what their core desire is, you know? Because I start to find themes in the porn. It's not just girl on girl. You know, there's usually something deeper, the way people touch, the setup. And I can get an insight into, oh, what they're actually looking for is deeper connection or spontaneity or to be praised, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
I look to porn for insight into my own clients. I find that personally, I don't watch porn, and I'm not just saying it. It's because I have this spanking fetish. I prefer to imagine things. I know a lot of women who
Mhm.
prefer erotica to actually watching things, and then even some men who prefer erotica to it. But I think porn is a great tool for people to explore some of their fantasies, as long as they're not leaning too heavily on it. The issue I have is that it's often not represented well, kink specifically, because
Yeah.
it's sexual domination or submission. You don't get to see the negotiation, you don't get to see all the safety aspects of it. That really bothers me because I think that there's a little bit of teaching that needs to go along with it. And that's not on porn to do, but it's on society to get a little bit more comfortable with kink so that we can open ourselves up to understanding how to do it safely.
Mm.
But yeah, I'm a fan of porn. I have no problem with my clients watching porn. I never try and turn anyone away from it unless they're having trouble orgasming in a
Yeah.
relationship. Yeah, a lot of people go through a period of time where they're not seeing anyone. Sometimes that can last 3, 5, 10 years, depending on maybe they're in a sexless marriage that they're just getting out of.
Hmm.
Those are clients who, if they're having trouble dating and achieving orgasm or just trouble with sex and intimacy in general, those are clients I'll recommend not watch porn. I'll ask them to stop, start to rely more on their own imagination, get more in touch with their body again. But other than that, I think porn is great. Even porn that shows kink. Sometimes that's the only way people get to explore it, by watching it in porn. And I would hate to think that it would sadden me to think that that wouldn't exist for them.
Mm.
And it's interesting. The UK right now is about to ban choking in porn, images of
Yeah.
choking, right? And I understand the intent behind that: protect women, protect people. There are a lot of dangers in choking. There is no safe way to choke someone. Like, that just needs to be out there. My concern is that instead of educating people around it, the movement seems to be shame people, scare people, ban it, the visual of it. I don't think it's going to go away.
No, that doesn't really work. So
No.
I've got, I've got a lot to say. A lot of things about what you just said there. So I've talked to quite a few adult content creators, sort of porn stars, female and male, and directors and things. And one of the big things they always talk about is that they want porn to be seen as entertainment and not education. And in particular, I think in the UK, I'm sure it's similar in the US, the average age that I think a boy in particular sees porn online is 12 or 13.
Yeah.
And most 12 or 13s, you're probably the exception, most 12 or 13-year-olds aren't really sure about stuff. And then suddenly they see, who knows, a woman with 5 men, a woman being choked, whatever. And they think, gosh, not that I'm sure they don't think, well, this is normal, but it does influence their way of thinking. So I think that's one thing. I think one of the things that sadly people think about when they think about porn tends to be Pornhub or YouPorn or whatever those different porn channels are. I think Pornhub gets 4 billion hits a month, and they're not all accidental clicking on a wrong icon. It's
Yeah.
people looking for this stuff. But there is some. I interviewed a fabulous female director called Inka Winter, and she does holistic or feminist porn. And the production values, the elegance of the porn, the discussion about consent, the discussion about contracts, etc., is part of the narrative, and it's so different than a 3 minute 20-second clip on Pornhub or whatever. So I would encourage people to go and seek out real porn, if you like, as opposed to the sort of fast food variety, which I
Yeah.
think you porn is. And then on the other point, I'm really, really glad you raised it. I think a lot of people seem to be challenged over the notion of BDSM and kink and domination and submission, etc. But I think there's a lot that so-called vanilla individuals could learn from it in terms of the time spent talking about what's a yes, what's a no, what's a maybe, talking about safe words, safe actions, talking about what somebody might want to try, and it just feels there's much more intentionality and energy put into BDSM kink scenes rather than a more traditional sex life. Might have been the same thing for the last 20 years, same position, same timing, same start, same finish, and there's no investment in that really. Whereas I think from the BDSM scenes in particular, where it really is it can be written down contract. We'll do this, we'll do this, we'll do this, we'll do this, which is really showing how important you think the other person is and how important you want them to think you are. So I do think there's a lot that can be taken from the different scenes that could be applied to general sex life.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that is one of the points. And I interviewed someone, a curator from Make Love Not Porn, and it was a similar thing. It's actual people. It's almost like a TikTok or an Instagram, but where there's porn, but the couple talk about it. You sort of see more of
Yeah.
what's going on. I would not say it's definitely not a high-end dining version because it's not high production value always, but it's very real. It's more
Mhm.
like an intimate personal kitchen setting version. And I think that it is important to get to see couples have these real discussions. But I, in my fantasy world, even on Pornhub, there, how when you're you're watching a clip on TV and it says this stunt was performed by professionals, a little warning. I mean, I know porn is fantasy, but something that
Mm.
says this is not safe, this is acted out, or, some type of
Yeah.
warning. There is something to be said about you're right. I don't often think about the application of porn to like an 11 or 12-year-old person being exposed to it. And of course that is terrible. And it sort of brings in a different need though for more warnings as opposed to just hiding it all together because that stuff is going to exist and they're going to find their way to it, especially
100%.
this power play, this power exchange, BDSM, it is coming to the forefront. I mean, imagine if 20 years ago I told you everyone would know what cuckolding is and there would be tons of jokes around it, or foot fetish. I think it would be hard to believe. So I don't even know what to warn you or tell you about is going to be mainstream in 20 years. And that's the other thing. Certain kinks and things that are considered kinky are becoming mainstream. Like there was a time where blowjobs were considered kinky, because that wasn't part of sexual norm, and now it is.
They're so part of mainstream culture, whether it's Sex and the City or it's any magazine you see. I think they have done a power of good in bringing these into at least conversation. And I do think with the teenage boys, teenage girls, and porn, I just think it puts an onus quite rightly on the whatever the family unit looks like, or the school, or if it's an aunt or an uncle or a father or a mother or an older brother or a sister, whatever, to be comfortable talking about it. So the last thing you want to do is catch your son looking on the phone and say, right, I'm taking the phone off you for a month. I'm not
Yeah.
sure that's going to fix anything really, but actually talking about it, and yes, the first few seconds might be embarrassing, but I've got a 15-year-old son and an 18-year-old daughter, and I talked particularly to my son about it, and it was almost a conversation a bit like when someone watches a very, very violent film. It's like, look, it's not okay to go around and shooting people, don't you? Yes. Right. So,
Okay.
it's not all right to go around choking people. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. But it's a similar discussion, really. And I think, and guns cause a lot more harm
Choking. Yeah.
for some. Yeah, I think so.
I
Yeah, for sure.
agree. I mean, it is shocking to see all of the evidence come out about how dangerous choking can actually be. And it made me sort
Yeah.
of stop and think. I was like, oh, but the truth is people are still going to choke. I mean, do you remember 15 or 20 years ago? I felt like once a year there was a big autoerotic
Yeah.
asphyxiation death story, right? I don't
Mm.
hear those as much anymore. And I don't know, maybe people are realizing it's not safe to do that. But when I thought through choking and how people are still going to seek it out and how people would do it to themselves to
Hmm.
enjoy it, I realized it isn't going anywhere. There are certain people who need that, but without the conversation around it, and sex ed in the United States is brutal. It is terrible. It is not about pleasure at all. It is
Same,
really
same
just
here.
about safety. Yeah, and same in Ireland, right? I've heard really good
Hmm.
things about Germany,
Mhm.
Belgium, like some European countries,
And
mainland
maybe,
Europe.
I'm sure,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
really strong centering pleasure. Not so much in the US and I guess the UK or Ireland either. So,
Mm.
and that's where it comes into play. It's like if we're not having the conversation of, it's not okay to do that, there are people who might miss that message. So it's on schools. You're right. It's on parents to sort of explain, hey, I know you see it, but that's not actually how that goes.
Yeah, and you would rather, if somebody isn't thinks into choking, you would rather educate them on different elements of breath play and things that they can do more safely, because there are things you can do very safe, things that can come with a bit more risk, but you don't understand, well, that's the only thing you can do. And like you say, it to be a headline in one of the newspapers the next month or whatever. Yeah. Mm. When you talk to people and they have a relationship and they're happy moving into what might be defined as a kinky relationship, how do you help people set healthy boundaries, or do they need to have boundaries at all?
Oh, great question. Yes, I believe everyone needs boundaries. And I think we also do a really poor job of teaching people in general how to have boundaries and enforce them because there's so
Mhm.
much societal pressure to be nice, to be kind, to be polite. And sometimes we're taught, I think this especially happens for women, especially young girls. They're taught to be nice, they're taught to just be quiet. Children across the board are taught like, oh, grandma's here, give her a hug, whether or not they want to give that hug or not. So we get good at not paying attention to our own bodies. So the first step I tell everybody is start checking in with your own body. And I recommend that it's hard to do that just in a sexual sense. And you're talking
Mhm.
about boundaries in a relationship, but I
Mm.
recommend you go to the grocery store, you check in with yourself after that. Think, how did that interaction feel to me? It's not about whether it was fun or nice or not. It's how it felt in your body. And I use that example because it's the most mundane example. Maybe you're going to the barista, and you
Mhm.
take your coffee away. How does that feel? I'm trying to develop a habit in people of checking in with their own bodies depending on what they're experiencing, because I find we divorce ourselves from that, especially as time goes on. You need to work longer hours. So you have to divorce yourself from how your body is tired because you just need to do the work, right? And the more we live in society, I know this is a big answer, but the more we do that, the harder it is for us to connect with ourselves and understand our own boundaries because we keep pushing past our boundaries for ourselves. And then it becomes harder to enforce them with other people. Right.
Mm.
Okay. So I first encourage people to get more in touch with how they're feeling, doing gut checks. And that's homework I give people. I'm like, okay,
Mm.
in the next week, I want you to take note of how you're feeling in different situations and come back and talk to me about it. And it's a habit, it's a muscle that you're, exercising and you get better at it. Then you start to do it in partnership too. And it's something I practice in my day to day life. I went on a date with someone recently and things went, there was nothing wrong, but I gave this feedback of like, actually, I'm not into this right now. And that took me checking in with myself. I actually said, I just need to run to the restroom. I went to the restroom. I was like, how do I feel about this right now? I went back and I said, listen, this is how this feels in my body. I'm not really into it. And he was totally respectful of that. And he understood. I don't know if even 5 years ago, I would have had the ability to do that because it's something you need to practice daily. I think 5 years ago, I just would have done it and been like, lesson learned, don't do that again. But it wasn't
Yeah.
lesson learned. It was bad habit reinforced as
Mm.
opposed to lesson learned because I just would have gone through the motions. And this is more empowering, but it takes practice. So I teach people check in with yourselves first, then start enforcing it with others. And then you start to learn your boundaries as you experience them because there are going to be new scenarios brought up all the time. You're going to have new partners or even your own partner. If you're exploring kink, there's going to be new experiences you have. You really need to have built that ability to check in and see how it's feeling. Because I would rather teach someone that before they start exploring kink. So when they explore, they know whether they enjoy it or not, versus
Mm.
having them go through a poor experience. Because a poor experience in kink can set you back. I have clients who are set back by 10 years because they had a bad experience doing something and they've totally turned off it, but they realize then the desire is still there and they want to revisit. So I help reintroduce them to it.
That was a good answer.
Oh, thank you.
No. I was just thinking, literally, before we started recording, I was telling you about how I felt after coming to the dentist. And it was that sort of checking in after leaving there. I was, oh, how do I feel about that? It is. And we don't often, we just move from one thing to the next and don't think about how something made us feel or any emotion it stirred up or any physical element it's driven tension in our shoulders or gut feeling or whatever. So,
Yeah.
no. One of the things I found really interesting, I talked to I talked to a couple, but so one lady in particular is based in Romania, and she's a dominatrix, and she's just quite young. I don't know, she's sort of 30 or so, and she was absolutely fabulous. And she was talking about the most of the men that come to her because they feel they can't ask their partner for what they want, which is to be submissive for a period of time. And she said, I mean, maybe this is counter to what some people might think. She said that most of the people that come to her are high-powered executives, lawyers, CEOs, senior leaders, managers, etc. And in their regular life, they have to be in charge all the time. The buck starts with them. They're the one that's got to, take responsibility for everything. She said a lot of the time it's not necessarily even the physical acts that they undertake, it's the conversations they can have about being submissive and submitting and letting go of everything. And I wondered if it's something that people perhaps misconceive, that if somebody's a submissive or a dominant, that isn't necessarily a label for their life. That's something that they're into in a sexual way. And again, does that make sense? So it's not, so just because a man might want to be submissive, he's not a submissive at work. He's not, or a woman wants to be a dominatrix, or a woman wants to be submissive. Again, it's a different element to their standard life. And I wonder whether some people just get confused almost in themselves, think, well, I'm in charge of 1,000 people, but I want my wife to spank me or insult me or humiliate me or whatever. How can that work together? The two completely different sides of me. How does that all work together? I'm not sure what the question is there, but
No,
I'll let you figure one out.
I have so much to say about that. So I think when you're a pro dom, and I used to have that feeling too. Everyone who was coming to see me was a high powered executive. Even sometimes now, I do feel that a lot of people who come to see me, it's like, oh, you own your own business, you're doing a lot. But I also realized that when the barrier to entry is paying, you're self-selecting. Like the only people coming to you are people who can
Yeah,
afford to pay you.
yeah,
So I think the spectrum is a lot wider of people who are submissive. Like it's not all people in charge. There are some people who actually are submissive in their real lives and
yeah.
in their sex life as well. So there
Mhm.
every variation exists. But yes, you see a lot of people who just want to let go and be taken on a journey. And that's how I describe submission, dominance, a scene. It's a journey. And people who are in charge and have to make all the decisions do like to be taken on the journey sometimes. Then you have that opposite end of the spectrum where they're in charge and they also want to be in charge in the bedroom, you know? So there's no
Mhm.
one way to define it. But the duality definitely exists, right? For a lot of people that I'm in charge but I want to be taken in the bedroom and I want you to make the decisions. I don't know what the answer there is either, but I wanted to call out that I think that the duality, while it exists, every variation and every mix of person exists too. You know?
Yes, I think it's the well, it's reported to be the most common fantasy for women and lots of men is to be taken, is to be, and whatever way that comes to your imagination is to be taken. And I think there's a difference between what somebody might fantasize about and what they actually want to do. So I don't, and you can correct me, but I don't think the fantasies that we have, we necessarily want to act them out. I might fantasize about being with a she wolf or whatever,
Yeah.
or a vampiress, or I might fantasize about being with, a harem with 100 women. But it's not, I don't want that. But what I might want is, goodness, to be with a very muscular, strong woman, or I might want to be with, might want to be with my partner, but we give each other different names and we pretend we don't know each other. So I think there's something in almost I don't know how you do this. How do you convert the fantasy to something that you can actually
Try.
do? Yeah.
I mean, that's where role play comes in. And I've done a
Mhm.
lot of the role plays you just described. So as you're saying them, and that's actually on the last point as well. for these, if you don't mind me just going back a little bit and just saying that for these clients of dominatrices, I've never really remembered what the plural of
Quite
that
right.
is. Um, a lot of it is role play, but I think we also need to normalize it. If so many, that's the thing, because we shame this and we hide it away, people act like it's not normal. But what these people are asking for is quite normal, almost mundane at times. So what? He wants to be spanked a little bit and he wants to be told he's bad and needs to be better and do things better. Like, that's such a small thing. But the idea that a man would be submissive, how shocking. It's a societal framework that we've put in place because men are supposed to be masculine and women are supposed to be feminine and weak, and men are supposed to be strong and carry the burden. We need to do away with all of these ideas and just look
Mm.
at it, look at each role play or instance for what it is and understand what's the core desire behind it, because that's
Mhm.
what normalizes it. That's a lot of the work I do. But anyway, I just wanted to
Mm.
point out that we act like these things are so different. And you weren't doing that, but society as a whole acts like, oh, he wants to be submissive and he's strong in the boardroom, but he wants to do this. How shocking. But it's not, you know? Same with these role plays. Someone wants to, I don't know if you know this, but there's this book called A Court of Thorns and Roses. And it's this fantasy fairy world, and there's some erotica in it, and there's definitely some BDSM elements. Admittedly, I only read the first book because people were going crazy about it. It's not my thing, but I could see how it could be a lot of people's thing. And it's become a major fantasy that they have. In fact, I have a friend who has it's not a subscription box, it's a kink role play box. And one of the most
Mhm.
popular ones is her fairy role play box, where you can get the little ears and put them on and play out that scenario. And that's what you were describing as well, where you just wanted to try out different scenes. You want to put on a costume, even if it's not a physical costume, just take on that role and explore it with someone. And it can be that easy. Everyone says like the biggest sexual organ is the brain. And I believe
Mhm.
that because you're playing a fantasy game with your partner, and there's nothing wrong with that. It adds spice, especially in a monogamous relationship where you're only having sex with each other and you only have intimacy with each other. After 30 years, I imagine, I mean, I'm 36, so I wouldn't even know yet, but I imagine it gets a little tiring. So it's fun to add these elements in and try something new. I
Mm.
love playing the game where I go on a date and I pretend it's our first date, or we just meet each other in a bar and then one of us takes the other home. I love pretending to be someone else because you also get to re-explore your partner for the same time. But the way I like to play it is honestly, I'm me and they're them, but we haven't met each other before. And you ask questions like it's a first date, questions you're not normally asking when you're sitting together on a normal, let's go to dinner night. You're treating it like a first date with your partner, so you're learning them again. I think that's really fun. That's not even a role play at that stage. You're just sort of breaking it down to the origins of your relationship. Obviously, the vampire and the werewolf thing, which is also very common, that's more of a full on role play. Yeah.
So do you have a role play box?
No, so I my role plays tend to be quite domestic, but I have a favorite role play, and it's a scene. I love interrogation scenes. I
Mhm.
love them so much because it's the one time in the world of kink and BDSM, you have something called a safe word. And the idea is that the Dom isn't playing to your safe word because they're paying attention to how you are. Vice versa, either a Dom or sub can call a safe word depending on how comfortable they are. What I like about an interrogation scene is the point is almost to play to your safe word. I'm a bit of a masochist and a sadist, so I enjoy pushing myself and other people to the edge of their boundary. Um, and I find that an interrogation scene does that because they can give up at any time. They just have to give up the information, and the information becomes kind of like the safe word. So I think that that's a really fun one to do. And so I do that. And I had a new partner earlier this year and he had never done an interrogation scene. So I got that box from Saturday Box and gave it to him as like, okay, here, learn how to do it and let's do a scene. And we did it. We crafted a really great scene together where he interrogated me and I eventually gave up the answer.
I like that. And we do see the whole role play thing again coming out in mainstream media. There's a comedy show in the US I love called Modern Family,
Oh, yeah.
and they do it. Two completely supposedly vanilla characters, and the main guy plays a character called called Clive Bixby, and the lady plays Oksana, And he's not necessarily very very good at it, but they do have the same sort of thing. And she meets him in a coat without anything underneath it. And obviously the coat gets caught in the escalator. Her father turns up and trying to get the coat off her,
Yeah.
and hilarity ensues. But at least they are doing this thing where they are being somebody different for the night, or they could, like I say, could be themselves. I find one of the reasons I love doing this podcast is I actually get to talk to people properly for like an hour or so. Actually ask each other questions. And often in a relationship or in a friendship, even once you sort of know each other, you don't sit down and think, right, so question number 7. You don't.
Yeah.
You just end up, as you say, like, right, whose turn is it? You haven't taken the trash out. Come on, can you empty the dishwasher? Or what's for dinner? It's those sort of things. You don't tend to have those conversations. And I think, yeah, going out for dinner and actually having a conversation where you're just getting to know each other again for the first time, I think that's fascinating. And also getting to know each other as you are today, not as you were, pre-kids, or not as you were before you first met each
Yeah.
other. Just how are you? Yeah, who are you today? Because you're not the same person that I met 25 years ago. You're somebody different, somebody that I love and adore, but we're both different people. So who are you? I think that's something that's really, yeah, really, really, really worth doing.
And doesn't it sound fun and exciting and interesting now when you frame it
Yeah,
that way too? You're
it
like,
does.
oh, I can't wait to go re-meet the person I've been with for 5, 10, 20 years. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I'd encourage everyone to try that at least once.
What do you think are some of the, and this might be a long, long answer, what do you think are some of the most persistent misconceptions about kink or BDSM that you could put to bed once and for all?
I think one of them is that it's all from trauma. That's the first one that comes to mind because everyone thinks, oh, and if I can take a step back, the
Hmm.
most persistent thing is that kink is something other people do. We love to other ourselves from the people who practice kink. And that's
Hmm.
because of how we see it portrayed in the media. We see um, we see the billionaire, and that's so unrelatable, and the meek woman who's maybe dressed in 5-inch heels, and she looks beautiful. And then that others it, right? Because that's not what most people we know look like. It's not what I look like. It's not what I'm ever dressed like. Or it's the executive who's being tied up by a dominatrix. Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
really, in real life, sometimes it's the husband who is being bent over and pegged by his wife, who has a strap on in her bedside locker that she only got to make him happy one time and realized, hey, this isn't so bad, and it makes him happy, you know? And then we have a better, like, stronger communication and intimacy because of it. Real life kink looks different, but a lot of people practicing kink don't even use the word because how we talked about earlier, it's kind of like a label that you don't need to carry with you. But also, once you hear the word kink, then you immediately divorce yourself from it because you're like, oh, that's that weird thing. Because that
Mm.
people think kink is weird. So my number one thing is it's not weird. It's totally normal. So many people are doing it. Even if you just, a really common thing is to pin someone's hands above their head during sex, a man or a woman. Choking is pretty common. These are all kinky things that
Yeah.
are quite normal or standardly practiced. So my thing is kink is not this weird other thing. It's something you're probably doing right now in your own sex life. With that said, I think another reason people separate themselves from it is there is this notion that all kink comes from trauma and the only people who practice kink have been traumatized as children or abused or neglected. And that's absolutely not true either. As I say, I was born this way. Sure, I've added a little flair here and there from my life experiences. There are core desires I have based on how I was raised and things I felt I was missing as a child. That is everybody. What we crave, some people crave connection. They want to be seen. Some people want shame and embarrassment so that they feel empowered because they were bullied as kids. There are multiple different things we can go through that affect what we want sexually now.
Mm.
And yeah, that's all falls under the umbrella of trauma. So I'm not saying that no kink comes from trauma, but a lot of
Mm.
it doesn't. And I think we need to understand that to embrace it fully and realize what we're doing is kinky so that we can learn more about it. And it circles right back to when I'm talking about labels, road signs, going down a specific journey. You need to understand, hey, you're kinky. This is kink. There are ways to do these things safely. You might have feelings the day after doing this, and unless you're aware what you were doing was maybe considered kinky or something different, kink has a whole bunch of words for the experiences you have. And sometimes when you can put words to something, it's empowering. Like there's something
Yeah.
called subspace and subdrop, and there's dom space and dom drop, where you're in the flow of it during a scene and your endorphins are rushing, and then you can crash out in a few hours or the next day because you're on such a high that it
Mm.
can go low, and that can feel like almost a depression. And I worry about people who aren't familiar with these words because I'm like, oh, are they feeling really down one day and maybe feeling shame and guilt and not realizing this is normal and it's a biological reaction as opposed to shame, true shame. Do you know what I mean? If you can put words to it,
Yeah.
it's empowering. You're right. That was a long answer, but
No, no, it's a great answer.
yeah.
One thing we haven't necessarily touched on is sort of aftercare after a scene, yeah, I guess it's almost so you might be in a standard relationship, very senior at work or very senior at work or work at home or whatever, primary caregiver, all those sort of things, and you change roles perhaps in the bedroom or wherever you choose to act the scene out. How do you evolve the aftercare so you almost get back to the standard narrative? Because a lot of times when people have sex, the movies would have you think, well, you have a cigarette, or probably now you just check your phone,
Yeah.
roll over and go to sleep. And I sort of feel that in a scene, particularly in a scene where you might have, equipment or things or bondage or whatever else, you've got to sort of put things away and undo things, all that sort of stuff. How do you handle the aftercare side of things?
I'm just having a realization that I want to call out before I forget it. The cigarette. Before we all had phones and I was having sex before we all were on our phones constantly, a cigarette was something I used to smoke. It's interesting because I'm realizing one of the things that does is it allows you to reconnect with self, and it's a separation. So you're either going into your phone or you're having a cigarette, which is even if you're sharing the cigarette,
Yeah.
it's a very singular action that brings your energy back and focus back to yourself post sex. So I
Mm.
think I wanted to call that out because there's a reintegration with yourself period after sex where you're pulling your energy back in and focusing on yourself. That happens. And I think that's its own version of aftercare where you're like, okay, let me just focus on me again for a second. Aftercare can look a lot of different ways. And when I talked about boundaries with yourself, it's
Mhm.
checking in with yourself. And that's how you learn what type of aftercare you need, what's going to feel good for you afterwards. For a lot of people, it's cuddling. Because like you
Mm.
finish a cigarette and then you hold each other. Or, you put your phones back on the bedside table and you hold each other. Or you do that before you check in. You learn what works for you and what feels good. For me, what I discovered is it's really important for me the next day to be able to text with the person who I had a scene with, just in case I am feeling some of that shame. I want to be able to text them and just make sure they still respect me as a human. And depending on what the scene was, if it was a very heavy degradation scene and I'm dropping from it, I might want to be able to touch base. And I won't say like, do you still respect me? But just knowing that I have their attention and their support the next day, that means something. That took some learning and checking in with myself and recognizing the patterns of what I needed. This is another thing people need to go through with aftercare. There are certain people who say, I don't need aftercare. Personally, I think everybody needs aftercare. They're just not naming it that, depending on maybe they need it for themselves and they're able to give it to themselves by having a cigarette or checking their phone. Maybe that's their version of their own aftercare. But there's no blanket statement of what aftercare looks like. What is blanket is you need to start recognizing your own patterns and what it is you need so that you can communicate that before you start a scene. I'm not saying you can't communicate the aftercare needs after, but the truth is the partner you've played with might not be able to give you emotionally, physically the aftercare you need. And you should be aware of that going in, whether or not they have the ability to do that.
Do you recommend that people, it feels like a very dry word, not at the time, maybe a day later or 2 days later, that you have a debrief?
Oh, I think a debrief is an amazing thing. I often debrief right after a scene. So you're like,
You're like an actress. You're very demanding. So how was I? What was it like?
yeah.
What did you think?
No,
What did you think? I want to know.
Even just so, well, what did you enjoy? What would you like more of? What would you like less of? Oh, during this part, how did you feel? You know, sometimes in the middle of a scene, I'll give feedback too, because sometimes not feedback that you're not doing that well. But recently,
Brilliant.
I have a blog and I'm writing out a week. I was at a weekend long kink party and I'm writing the story out in a blog, and I haven't gotten to this section yet, but there was a point where he called me pathetic, and I didn't know I didn't want to be called pathetic. I've never like had that experience, and I sort of looked up at him and I said, I didn't look at him. I just turned my head sort of in his direction, and I was like, not the word pathetic, and he said okay, and then we went right back into the scene
Yeah, yeah.
together.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll communicate my boundaries in scene, and then later we'll talk about it. And and in that same scene, I said something that not offended him, but threw him off a little bit, and he just pushed past it and he didn't say, "Don't say that." He could have, but he chose not to. So we both had these moments in this one scene where the wording that we were using wasn't vibing with the other person. We addressed it in different ways, but we talked about it while cuddling during aftercare of like how it made each of us feel. And um, I like it because it's top of mind. But yeah, again, that's something you decide. Do you want to do it right after? Do you want to do it the next day, a couple of days later? And you communicate that as well.
Hmm. I was a little bit surprised when you said that maybe you've been in a scene that's been a degradation scene, and I know the guy's been calling you a slut and a whore, and he's yeah, whatever, he's degraded you, that you have that need to just check in to make sure that isn't how it really feels. I was
That's
surprised you did that. Yeah. Is that because there is still a little part of you that does feel a bit insecure about what you're doing and how you interact with DOMs?
Oh, you are quite astute. I do sometimes still feel a little bit of insecurity about it. Yeah. I feel I was raised by a single mom. I was
Yeah.
surrounded by strong women. I still am.
Mhm.
I consider myself a strong woman, and there is that duality that I struggle with. Sometimes I really fight against the fact that I am submissive. It's rare, but it depends on my partner. And what I will say about this play partner who I refer to in the blog, who is coming to visit me at the end of this month, one of the things I enjoy about him is I find it very easy to be what I would say is insecure around him. I can lean into my vulnerability. I feel secure in my insecurity about being submissive, and I feel safe with him. Logically, I am always okay with it because I understand this is what I want. It's normal. It's in my body. It's part of the drop.
Yeah.
It's the conditioning that I need to handle everything. And for a moment, I gave up control. That is something that it takes me a minute to recalibrate after a moment like that. And that's why the texting the next day is important to me. But
Mm.
it's really funny you asked that. I now have my own shame sometimes around not being 100% comfortable with submitting. It's
Of
not
course.
about being submissive. Now I'm like, why can't I be more
Why don't
comfortable?
I just own it? Yeah.
Yeah. Especially doing what I do. As the kink consultant, of course, I want to be the poster child for practicing kink perfectly. But I think I am the poster child for it because it's an imperfect science.
I was going to say exactly that. I think you are absolutely the perfect poster woman for it, in that you represent what it actually is and don't represent either a Hollywood version of it or a sanitized version of it, or saying that, it's because the last thing you want to hear is that there's this somehow there's a sort of, right, you've achieved kink black belt, you're
Yeah.
premium level now, and oh my god, I'm on a green belt, I'm on just starting. You don't want that. You want to think, well, this is where I'm at the moment. This is just what I want. It's what I desire. But I'm a big believer in that we carry a lot of things in our body from previous generations without even knowing it. And it doesn't necessarily need to be inherited trauma. It's just we inherit things. We don't just inherit how we look and our color of eyes and our hair, lack of hair, or whatever. We carry something in ourselves from our grandparents, great grandparents, and part of your fear is that somehow you are denying what those suffragettes did that won the vote for us. You are denying the fact that women can vote. You're denying that women can drive cars. You're denying all those things by completely submitting to somebody else, which is. I'm not saying it's silly, because it's not at all, because it's part of who is in your body, and I think it's a really strong testament to you that you recognize that you both want to check in the next day, but also have that sense that you understand why you feel like that. And I think a lot of people might have the same feelings and feel a bit uncomfortable the next day, but don't understand why. So I think you've always done a lot of work to get to that place. And I think that's really, I think that's, again, another tick for the poster child.
Well, thank you. And that's something a lot of kinksters are doing, and people in the kink community. And that's why I really hate how kink has such a bad name, because there are so many wonderful facets to it. There are so many important ways that we know to explore ourselves and check in with ourselves that don't necessarily exist outside of the kink framework, and I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying, being in the community, I was given the words and the tools. And then I further educated myself and became certified and learned even more about the somatic experience. And I paid a lot more attention to my body. But I think by othering ourselves from the word kink and this community, we're really starving ourselves of this wealth of knowledge and ability to understand ourselves and explore pleasure in a deeper way. So even though, thank you for all of the compliments, in my world, it's actually quite common, to check in with yourself in this way.
Do you love your body and its ability to feel pleasure?
I love my vagina, and I always have. That's something that set me apart. I have a personal relationship with my vagina, and I often compare it to how men feel about their dicks. The stereotype of men love their dicks. I'm like, yeah, I love my vagina, and I always have. And I've always been very strong-minded and vocal about making sure during sex, even from the first, maybe the second time I had sex. I remember my partner being like, "Oh, no one's ever given me so much direction before." And I'm like, "Well, I know what feels good, and I'm here to have a good time. So let's
Yeah.
make that happen." Do I love my body? No. It is a constant struggle to love my body. I Societal messaging worked well on me. I was born in the 80s. I went through the early 2000s where skinny as fuck, skeleton skinny was in, and I've never been that. That's not my body type. I try to love my body, but it is a barrier sometimes to loving myself. So that's something I work on daily. In terms of the connection I have with self, it's very strong, and I do love that. So I do have a good connection with myself and how I think and how I experience and move through the world. I know what feels good, and I always move in that direction of this feels fun, this feels good. Or if it doesn't feel fun, I inject fun into a situation. And I think that's because of my ability to check in with my body and see how I feel. But I have a lot of insecurities about how I look. And it's mostly all weight related. It's how my body looks as opposed to how my body feels. Yeah, good question. I told you that it would be hard to make me uncomfortable with a question. I think you managed it. And I'm delighted you did, because I love facing the things that make me uncomfortable.
It's really interesting you said about loving your vagina, your knowing your vulva as well as you do. Because I read a stat the other day, and this is crazy, but something like 34% of women have never looked at their vagina in a mirror. And for guys, it's just there, really.
You don't
It's
even
just
need a mirror. That's
dangling
the thing.
down. We're always
Yeah.
touching it, always moving that way, moving to one side or another, always sort of making sure, just sort of tapping it to make sure it's still there.
Yeah.
But it's bizarre, isn't it? But it saddens me a lot that women haven't taken that time, because it's a lot more complicated than the dick. There's a lot more going on down
Oh,
there,
so much going on.
and there's so much. And I think again, you hear increasingly of people having labiaplasty and lots of things, having their vagina adjusted and changed because
Yeah.
they think their lips are too long or too dark or they're too prominent or whatever. And it's, I think I probably I think I can speak for most men here. We've never seen a vagina we don't like. We just don't. And I think it's almost like you say, being very comfortable and recognizing that is it is the most powerful vessel, if you want to call it that way, that's ever been developed.
Yeah.
It's where life comes from. It's where life starts. It's where life's built. It's where life's created. It's everything really. It's the essence of what it is to be human. And yeah, I don't think there's even a question here. I just wish women were more comfortable, excited by, interested in, willing to explore that part of their body, as well as exploring, are my nipples sensitive, my breast sensitive? Do I like my knees being touched? Do I like my ears? All that sort of stuff. But you think at the essence of things, because if a woman doesn't really know that part of her body intimately, it's very hard, like you said, to get that direction and to come away from her sexual experience, vanilla or otherwise, feeling fulfilled.
Yeah. And I think some of that, not to blame society and education, but once again, women are socialized to protect their virginity at all cost, right?
Yeah.
And that means protecting your vagina, pussy, vulva, whatever. And it's interesting, we spend a lot of our formative years thinking that this is the most important thing we have and then not engaging with it either. You're taught your virginity is so important. It's a gift. So we're like in ownership of this apparent gift that we also don't explore and understand, oh, what's so great about it? Like, let me take a look. I remember the first time I looked at mine, I was 3 years old. And the reason I remember, so I've never shared this story, I don't think, is I was 3 in the bathroom and my dad walked in and like saw me doing it. And my dad's from Iran, very old school, different type of life. And I remember still looking at it and him and my mom talking outside the door. And he's like, oh, she's doing this. And my mother being like, yes, that's normal. Like, she's obviously an intelligent girl who just wants to explore her body. This is like something children do. She had to explain that to him, but he was so scared of me getting to know my own vagina. And I think that is a really weird thing and just speaks to how that type of conditioning, that type of idea that we shouldn't do that. I mean, that was a message I was getting at 3 years old. Not that I was part of the conversation, but I heard it happening as I was looking at my own vagina. I guess the stat shouldn't surprise me that so many people haven't looked at their own. What did you say? 33%?
Yeah.
It saddens me, but it's understandable because I think humans, we pick up on a lot of stuff that isn't said. I was not in the middle of the living room I went into the bathroom and looked, and that's a 3-year-old. So I knew something about this. I was like, oh, this should be private. I shouldn't do this out in the open. How did I know that? How did I get that messaging at that time? And I think that my point is, people go through their whole lives getting this messaging and maybe they don't rebel against it and go check and look. And instead they internalize it and they're like, looking at your vagina is not something you do. So then they don't. And then we have 1/3 of women not having ever looked at it. I look at mine on a regular basis. There's a mirror near my bed for this purpose, but I do what I do. And I love that.
Yeah. You're possibly the outlier.
Yeah, I think I am. We need outliers. Yeah.
But and I think as kids, naturally, if you've got a brother or a lot of parents bathe with their children, you're sort of like, why haven't I got that?
Yeah.
He's got that, and I've got this, and why does that? Why is that stretchy and this isn't stretchy? And it's what you do as 3 and 4 year olds, for goodness sake. But it's when that's a stage where I think a lot of what you believe can be formed really when a parent smacks your hands away and says that's dirty.
Yeah.
That sits with you for a hell of a long time, versus the parents that are much more comfortable, walk around naked or whatever. It's something quite different.
And who knows? Maybe I love my vagina because at 3-year-old I got this like messaging of a conversation I wasn't in that was like, oh, she shouldn't be doing that. And my rebellious 3-year-old may have been like, fuck you, I'm doing it. I love myself,
And I'll do it for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Just to change the topic a little
Yeah.
bit, there's a new show coming out called X Factor. That's EX Factor as opposed to X Factor. And you have been kind enough, crazy enough to
Crazy enough.
volunteer
Oh,
to
the
go on this.
answer is crazy
Okay,
enough. Yeah.
to go on this online data show where you're going to meet one of your ex partners and two new potential partners. And the phrase that they use to describe you is she's sweet, she's submissive, she's the total prize, which is nice. But if you stick some bows on, you'd be
Yeah.
fine. Why on earth are you doing that? And what do you hope to experience?
So, really good question. The host of the show is a friend, and I knew she was doing this show. And I think, sort of a little bit how we talked about it about kink earlier. Uh, I meet a lot of people, a lot of women who might even identify as vanilla, but they want a dominant man, right? Or
Mhm.
because it's becoming a lot more mainstream to call yourself submissive and say you're looking for a dom. And they contact me and they're like, how do I meet a dom? How do I meet a dom? And I admit it's hard. So I'm sort of pulling that out into, I guess, bringing it front of stage. And I every time I talk about this, I hide behind my hands because it is something that I don't think I've ever felt more vulnerable in this of putting myself out there and being like, yeah, it's even hard for me to meet a dom. It's hard to meet someone who matches my kinks. Let's put this on display and just show the actual process of it. So the X factor piece of it is I was in a relationship for 7.5, 8 years. I dated a lot in New York City before that. And my one
Mhm.
rule is it cannot be that ex because I have no doubt
Yeah,
he is not for me. But there were people from my past. And when you live in New York City, it's very easy to date. You're taking the subway. It's very easy to get anywhere. You're in a city of 8 million people. The catchment area, like the actual commutable area, is like 20 million people. The pool is large. So you end up dating a lot. Um, so there are some people where I'm like, oh, maybe I would get back with them. I'm not sure who will actually, and we're not even 100% sure an ex will show up, like will put themselves forward. At least I'm not. I'm pretty in the dark about a lot of this. I just had to, and it's uncomfortable. The host is a sex and relationship coach as well. She's much more on the dating and relationship side, and she almost fancies herself a matchmaker. So I'm like, all right, let's put this to the test. And she asked me a lot of difficult questions that I even struggle to answer about what I want, what I'm looking for, what my standards are. And that she took my answers and created this profile for me of what I'm looking for. And it's a stressful thing for me because I feel very exposed. Yeah, and I love to feel uncomfortable. We know this. I love to feel uncomfortable. So why wouldn't I do this?
so you're just going to come out on stage naked, but with your wrists bound and ankles bound, and that's it.
No, I will be
Wow.
clothed, but
Okay.
I yeah, I'm actually not even 100% sure exactly how it's going to go. Like I am going to be blindfolded. I
Okay.
do not know and I mean it's easy enough. I mean these exes that like, it's been a long time since I've been in a relationship with anyone other than this 7.5 year
Yeah. Yeah.
situation. Yeah. So am I crazy? 100%. Am I uncomfortable? 200%. But I'm willing to give it a go and see how it goes. And I think that a show like this could actually really take off because
Yeah.
I believe that I do believe right person, wrong time. And there could be,
Yeah. I was going to say that.
yeah,
Like, it's seven. You might be with somebody 10 years ago, and you're both at very different stages in your life now, and you both develop different thoughts, different feelings, everything. So, who knows? Or you might, like, say, meet somebody that's brand new that you think, "Gosh, this is what I've been looking for,"
yeah,
without even knowing what you've been looking for.
yeah. So, and honestly, I put out a lot of content on social media, and no one really talks to me about it, so I forget that anyone is even watching my content, right? But this
Yeah.
X Factor thing, the amount of people, my family members who have reached out to me, mostly to make sure it's not the 7.5 year ex, they're like,
Mm.
"This isn't your ex fiance, is it?" I'm like, "No, that's the one rule. It cannot be my ex fiance." Um, so many people are engaging with this content and the premise of this show, kink aside. just the idea of
Yeah.
revisiting an ex and comparing it to dating new people, it's exciting. And I'm really proud of the organizers of this event and this show, because they are willing to take a chance on kink, and making it a very sex positive event. And I think that is something that very few groups are doing. It's once again that idea that, like, oh yeah, kink is something other people do without realizing it's something everybody does. And on top of that, I'm a 36-year-old woman. A lot of dating shows center around people in their mid to late 20s. And the host, Catherine Drysdale, her whole point is you're not ready to settle down and develop a real relationship a lot of the time until you know yourself and you're in a place to do that. And that is, nowadays, that is in your mid 30s. Maybe 15 years ago it was mid 20s, but the world has changed a little bit, especially in cities like London, New York, LA. It is people who are a little older who are ready to settle down versus someone who's 25. Now, I live in Vegas for now, but I am moving back to New York. In Vegas, it's a little more common. In parts of Texas, it's a little more common to settle down earlier, but I think the age is creeping up there for sure.
And when is it going to be made? When will the show?
The show happens on August 6th, and then I think that the clips will live on for a really long time. And the hope is that it will get bigger and the premise will be picked up by a show. That's our hope for it. But you need a proof of concept first, and this is our proof. And I'm not saying it's always going to be a kinky person,
No.
but we're starting here.
And you don't think the ex will be your ex-husband?
No. He lives in Ireland, and I do not think he'd be coming back here for it. He's remarried. He's married again. Actually, very shortly after we broke up, he started dating a friend of his, a coworker. And I am telling you, as soon as I saw her, I couldn't even be angry or jealous or anything. I was like, oh, that's the person he's supposed to be with. Like, it was so obvious to me we were not a match. And my hope is for my own life that I find someone I'm like, oh, it's so obvious. This is the person I'm supposed to be with.
What's your thoughts on polyamory and non-monogamous relationships?
I think they're wonderful I think some people are just meant for that type of relationship. That is the type of connection they crave, and that's what fills them. It's not for me, and that's why I'm monogamous. And I've dabbled with it, and it's interesting because when you're dating, actively dating, it's kind of like being polyamorous. You have multiple friendships and relationships going on until you decide who you want to commit to. I try and not date a lot. I definitely do not have I try and only have one sexual partner at a time, whether or not it develops into a long-term relationship or not. That's how monogamous I am. But I think polyamory and ethical non-monogamy, or consensual non-monogamy as it's called now, is a completely valid relationship type. It doesn't work for me, but I know a lot of people who it is the perfect solution, and it's kept their relationship together because people are able to explore and get certain needs met elsewhere. And that's what it's about. I know a lot of kinky people who they are in a relationship with a partner who's not into their kink specifically. So they go outside of the relationship to explore. And I think that's a wonderful way to have your needs met, but stay in the main relationship you're in if you're practicing hierarchical polyamory. Yeah.
So that suggests that when you start dating somebody, you have to get it out pretty quickly, your kink. Because if you go on 6 days, 10 days, whatever, and you find out, right, this person isn't into this at all, then it's sort of time wasted. So you get it out and say, I guess with the poncho now for Googling somebody before we date them, I guess people pretty much know what they're going to get when you turn up. But if they don't, do you put it out on the table?
Yeah, I do. I personally do, because it's so important to me. I've had relationships fail because we didn't match up. That is not why me and my ex didn't work out. In fact, the fact that we worked so well on that plane, it probably kept us together longer. Yeah. I always put it out there at the beginning, and I recommend that if you are kinky, you should bring it up early, because if it's such an important part of what you want in a relationship, why would you hide that? It's like, I wouldn't recommend someone who knows they want to get married and have children wait till date 10 to say that. I would say that within the first 2 to 3 dates, right? My goal is to end up in a kinky relationship. I should be bringing that up early on. I feel comfortable enough in being able to talk about how kink doesn't necessarily mean sex for me. So
Mhm.
by bringing this up, I'm not suggesting we go back and have sex. But balancing that duality is difficult because for a lot of people, they just think kink equals sex and they get confused. So you need to make sure you're talking to someone who's at least understands the concept.
Mm.
For people who, and my point is that's a high priority item for me. So of course I'm going to bring it up early. For some people, it falls like maybe 3, 4, or 5 on the list, lower down. If
Yeah.
it falls lower down on your priority list, you bring that up on day 2 or 3. And my recommendation is always you bring it up before intimacy starts or at the same time you're bringing up conversations around intimacy and you ask them if there are any fantasies they've ever wanted to explore. And then that opens it up. And I want you to listen to what the answer is for the person. You're not just using that as a way to bring up your fantasies. Learn about them. And then you
Mm.
can get an idea of maybe how open they are to possibly hearing yours. I don't think their answer should stop you from sharing your own fantasy. But if they're like, oh, I'm totally vanilla, I'm really not into any of that kinky stuff, then that's a pretty strong indicator.
Check.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Check, please. We're out.
Mm.
It's a pretty strong indicator that person is not going to fulfill your kink needs. And sure, every time I say a sentence like this, I will inevitably get this DM being like, I heard you on this podcast and you said this, but in my relationship, this worked out. And I'm like, that's amazing for
Yeah.
you,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that you are the exception, not the rule, then. And take that win of being the exception, not the rule. I love hearing the stories, but it's very rare that that's how it works for everyone. Because then that would make it the rule, not the exception, you know?
It would. What's your what's the favorite scene you ever had?
Oh,
Are
great.
you willing to share?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Honestly, I think my favorite scene I ever had, recency is big for me. I love a new experience, is the one
Mm.
I'm blogging about right now. So,
Mhm.
if you go to amandadames.com, you can read this blog. It's like I spent a weekend at a kink party and I connected with a guy and we just hit it off and we went to deep, dark places together. And the reason that it's my favorite scene is it was more than one. We built on top. So I think we played 4 different times in depth and we built on top of it. So uh, on day 3, like of this 4-day party, I was jealous he was playing with other people. I had no jealousy is just a feeling that is natural. And I think a lot of
Mm.
polyamorous and E&M people
Yeah,
understand that.
absolutely.
Monogamous people definitely understand that they would feel jealous if their partner went with someone else. And instead of internalizing that and feeling shame about feeling jealous, I brought it out of the shadows and I was like, let's play with this. And I presented a scene to him where I called out the fact that I was jealous. And the scene was basically the idea that I dressed in slutty lingerie at the party to get other men's attention because I was jealous he was giving other women attention. And the whole premise of this scene was that I belonged to him and I couldn't just shop my body around the same way he can go play with other people. And that was the premise for the scene. And then it was sort of a degradation impact play scene where he was forcefully reminding me that I belonged to him and that I couldn't do that. And that was a favorite scene because we went to dark places and he got mean. This is the nicest, most gentle man ever. He's vegan. He's like literally doesn't even own leather implements, which is rare in like BDSM. Leather's a big thing. He only owns vegan leather. Sweetest guy ever. You would never think he is capable of turning into this very, what I would say, dark version of himself. And it's beautiful that we're both able to play with these shadow versions of ourselves. And I think that's why it's my favorite scene. So it's recent. I'm sure I've had other amazing scenes before,
Mm.
but this one's top of mind and I keep thinking about it. And I don't know how much, like, I mean, over the course of that weekend, he had me do things I've never done before. I crawled on the floor to him. You think that that's a common BDSM thing, and I'm sure it is for some people, but I have never crawled, even though I'm into degradation. And as I said, I just felt really comfortable in my own insecurities, vulnerability. I felt comfortable with him, and it allowed me to go to deeper places. And you can read about it on the blog. Like I go into detail there.
Everybody's already gone
Yeah.
to the blog. They're not listening anymore. So everybody's already gone to the blog. Mm. It's funny, isn't it? I've been vegan for about 12 years. Yeah, I don't have anything leather, but I can be very dark. Maybe that's the yin and the yang. Maybe.
Is your whole family vegan, if I can ask that?
They're not. I'm the only one.
Okay.
So everybody else, I don't drink either. So I stopped drinking about 14 years ago for lots of reasons. But yeah, so my wife is a meat eater, fish eater, drinks alcohol, everything, etc. So I'm sort of singular in that really, and I think maybe part of the other side of me comes from not having control over that side of things in the family. So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Mm.
Very interesting. So you kind of
You should have asked for a vegan on your. You should have asked for a vegan for the dating show.
Oh,
That vegans are the worst now, or the best.
I I think vegans can be quite kinky.
I
They
think it's very interesting because when I became vegan, I didn't know what it meant really. I learned about veganism. I wasn't vegetarian or anything. I just literally decided one day to be vegan, literally like that. And I remember coming home from work and my wife saying, "I've cooked chicken for dinner." I said, "Oh, I'm vegan now," and I hadn't mentioned it. I hadn't thought about it. I hadn't planned it at all. And then I sort of learnt really what vegan was. I thought, gosh, eggs, gosh, honey. Yes, I hadn't thought about any of that. Gosh, leather, shoes, clothes, everything, wool, silk, all those things. And I don't know, hardcore vegan. I mean, whatever. Yeah,
If
a
you're not
vegan.
doing honey, I consider
Mm.
it a hardcore vegan.
Yeah, no honey, no animal products, no wool, no silk, no nothing. Yeah, so cotton and hemp. It's it's pretty much it.
Those are really
Um,
great materials to only use on your skin. Yeah.
they are. But yes, yeah, sorry. Then when I went to like vegan shows, vegan festivals, whatever, there is definitely a much more exploratory sense around it. It's people that are in connection with their spirit or their sexuality. A lot of it. Yeah, a lot of people that are vegans that I know are very sexual beings as well. And I don't know whether it's connected, but it's far more so than I would experience in a. If I went to a standard meeting or a trade show or whatever, I wouldn't see that. But in a vegan show, there's lots of discussion about sexuality and relationships and different things, and people just seem more open really because being vegan is 15 years ago at least it was quite different. It was quite out there. It wasn't typical of society in the same way that a lot of people see that kink isn't
Yeah.
typical, isn't standard part. So I think there is that. I think there is a connection between elements like that. Yeah.
I got to tell you, if the roles were reversed and you were on my podcast, we'd be going deep into what happened 12 to 14 years ago that you gave up alcohol and changed to become a vegan. And I think a lot of life changes happen like that. You just wake up one day and you're like, this something's changed. This is different. I feel a different connection to the food I'm eating. Let me go
Yeah.
in this direction. Again, vegan is a signpost. You don't pull the signpost down and carry it, but that's the way you live your life and that's the journey you're on.
Mm.
But I can't help but feel something sparked it.
It's all about you today. You have to invite me to your podcast,
Yeah,
and I'll
I
try and
will.
think what the answers are. Yeah. Just a couple of final ones. How do you look after your own mental and physical well-being? How do you nourish yourself so you're feeling topped up and energized and full of life, almost outside of the king scene?
I play pickleball every day. Is if you like my social media,
It's the thing. It's the thing now, isn't it? It's
it
the
is.
thing. But
And
yeah.
it's funny, I only took it up because my ex and I went to the same gym and we
Mhm.
played tennis together. And I decided I don't want to see him at the tennis clinics. I don't want to see him on the tennis courts. I'll switch sports. And I had no
Mhm.
problem doing that. I was the worst tennis player. Um, like he was better at it. And I was like, he can have tennis. He didn't give a flying fuck. But I was like, I'm going to go play pickleball. And I just built such a community of friends. I, um, it became my network of people here. They became true friends. We talk about life we're off of the pickleball courts too. So I do that. I go to the gym. I really enjoy being in nature here.
Mm.
In Vegas, I'm making the most of it while I'm here and going on hikes. My friendships are extremely important to me, and I get to have really connected, in-depth discussions about feelings and life with my friends, and those are the people I surround myself with. All of that recharges my batteries, and I'm a huge extrovert, so I enjoy going to parties and getting out and meeting new people. I'm quite social. So those are all things I do to nourish myself outside of kink.
And has the pickleball racket ever been used for
No,
non-pickleball activities?
no, not for me.
Really?
I mean, maybe one or two. I had a boyfriend that I played pickleball with for a little bit, and one time on the court, he just tapped my butt with it, and I looked at it. Was no one was around, but I was very much like, not here, you know. And he was like, okay, okay, yeah.
It's a perfect size and shape, I guess.
It is. It's a perfect size and shape. I have perfect paddles for it, but I've never used it for that.
I think I've never seen now with a coach chastising his player for not performing as
Look
well as
at
she should do.
look at
So,
you already scene creating. I love it.
like that. Other kinks that you want to explore that you haven't yet?
So one of them is not necessarily a kink, it's sort of a dynamic. And that's a you can have kinks and explore them in the bedroom. But a relationship between a dom and a sub or a top and a bottom, we call that a dynamic. And it's
Yeah.
basically how they work together, how they play
Mhm.
together. I fantasize and toy with the idea of wanting to be a collared sub. And that's a level of commitment in my mind stronger than marriage. Like, as I say, I've been divorced once, I've been engaged
Yeah.
twice, once to my
Mhm.
husband and then to the ex fiance. I only want to be collared once. And that is a fantasy I have. I'm not sure if it'll ever happen, but that is something I want to experience that I haven't. So it's more of on the dynamic side than the actual kink itself. I've explored a lot of kinks, and I don't think there's much I want to try that I haven't at least dabbled in. There are things I want to do more and go deeper into, but nothing that I have never tried. Because I've been doing this
Yeah,
now
yeah.
for so long. I've had a lot of amazing experiences.
Have you tried a collar and see how you look?
Yeah, I do have some of the, like, collars on that I've used during play, and I think
Yeah.
it's a wonderful symbolic thing that does get me into a good headspace. But I imagine it for me, a collared sub doesn't mean, like, I wouldn't possibly wear the metal circular ones that everyone wears.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd probably want a necklace.
Mhm.
But that's just how I am. I'm a
Yeah.
softer human who isn't, I'm not sure I'd pull off the proper collar. I mean, I could if I wanted to, it's just not my style. Yeah.
Just a sense of ownership or belonging, I guess. You sort of feel with the weight of it
Yeah,
against your skin. It'd be very powerful.
a constant
Yeah.
reminder. Yeah.
Hmm. I hope you find that one
I
day.
really appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
No, I really do. And you absolutely, I can't think of anybody that deserves it more. Um, thank you so, so much. You've made me think of lots of things, and you're fascinating. I really hope. I know we took us a while to do this, but I'm so, so glad that you had the patience with me to rearrange and stuff.
Oh,
And yeah,
absolutely.
you're for a young person as you are, with the background you had and what you've been through and stuff, you seem to be in a very good place in your life. I know you said earlier on about, and a lot of people have to choose between, gosh, do I want to be incredibly wealthy or incredibly happy? Happy is always the way to go.
Yeah.
We never ever look. You won't look back when you're 80. You think, oh, I wish I had a bit more money. But if you would wish, oh gosh, I wish I had accepted that, or I wish I had a week of happiness, or I had extended that vacation, or I had done those things. So yeah, always go for happiness. But it's made me very happy spending time with you. So thank you so so much. I'm sure we'll get a lot of interesting comments,
No,
and you might get people
thank
saying, "But you said this, no, you said that."
you.
So yeah,
I can't wait. But honestly, this has been such a pleasure. I've read reviews of other guests who were on your show, and I've listened to other episodes, and you are an amazing interviewer, and I very much appreciate it. And I understand, I mean, I've enjoyed other episodes, but you ask such insightful questions that I don't think I appreciated when listening to other interviews of how deep you're able to get. That's an incredible skill. So it's been an honor to be on your podcast. Thank you.
oh, no, and you were willing to go there, which makes a big difference. So yeah, thank you. I'll yeah, I'll get you a copy of this and we'll get it out there.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, this was great.